and get everybody going this morning.
So at a couple of places during the meeting today, I'm going to ask for a quick poll, survey, vote, whatever you'd like to go out and do. So if I could have Rob or Dave administer that when we get close to those sections, I'll give you some fair warning, but probably one or two spots where I want to do a quick survey. With that, happy Saturday, everybody. Welcome to the virtual July meeting. Lots of stuff to talk about today, mostly about operational events that we've been involved in, and I hope to go out and get a good recap from most of the attendees today on what they did for field day in particular, and lessons learned from that. So be prepared. I'd like to go out and have that discussion. Also want to talk about what we're doing with possibly a change in the ARES mission and the mission going forward. And sounds ominous. It's not meant to be. It's just a reality check for our folks and our participants. So with that, did the virtual welcome. Do we have any new folks that are on board, new members, first time attendees? This would be the right time to raise your hand or wave at the screen. You can unmute yourself, and I guess we can call folks out and let people introduce themselves and why they are here today.
Yeah, we might have one or two new people here.
Yeah, hi, Glenn Buberl, KC6M. I've been a ham for a long time, but want to get active again, so I thought this was a good place to go.
Very good, welcome. Anyone else? And
Just
Rob,
in case, yeah, just in case you don't know how to raise your hand, if you click on the participants list over on the right side, then if you're using a PC, will be a little icon to raise your hand. So,
anyone else new to the group? First meeting, please introduce yourself, raise your hand, unmute. And if we're not seeing anybody else, we'll just move along. So Dave, national section related announcements, what's happening with the ARRL, what's happening with the organization from a management level, etc.
all right, a couple of things. First, the IARU HF World Contest is going on now this weekend. August 1st, 222 and up. So a couple of good contests coming up. Good time to get on the air. They are still actively looking for a formal CEO. Barry Shelley is running the organization currently, and they're still looking for an active CEO that can get the job done. The other thing, they're looking for a new emergency communications manager. Don't know what that's going to do to change ARES on their level. They set out some guidelines here about a year and a half ago, and in most of the sections, 71 sections, have tailored that to what works in their area. So I think that's where we're headed. What's going to work best for San Diego, and keep it at that. That's about it for now.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit later, Dave. When we talk about the state of ARES in Southern California and in our section, sections, plural, both Imperial and San Diego, I'd like to have you speak to what you've observed in some of the recent meetings that you've been attending and parts of the discussions that have been had with the different sections, what folks are expressing their concerns about with ARES from both the administrative level and the requirements, as well as the applicability of ARES to their local areas or even nationally. So be kind of thinking about that. I know you've been involved in a lot of those meetings, and that way it's not coming from my lips per se, because I've got some opinions on that as well. We'll move on to local and training announcements with Rob.
Bruce, thank you. So first up, we're talking just before this meeting started about a virtual convention that's going to be happening in August. and it is free from all reports. And you can register to get into some of the meetings which will be happening in August. And it's called QSOTodayHamExpo.com. So it's QSOTodayHamExpo.com. I've not registered yet, but some people have. And so by all reports, that's going okay. Next, hamstudy.org. You may have heard has got a wonderful program going of virtual exams for upgrades and new hams, going very well, remote testing. It's been a blessing for both candidates and VEs, and they are always in search for more VEs so that they can handle more testing. And if you're possibly interested, contact Heather, KM6ZQB, and she'll help you get set up. And we will post some information about that on the email reflector. And last item that I have is Roy has announced that the K6RR repeater at OTI will soon be linked to a Palomar machine with the same call sign, and that's on 449.260. 449.260 with a PL of 107.2. And so the Palomar machine and the OTI machine with the same call sign will be linked together sometime in the future. The 260 machine is operating right now, but the last time I checked, it's not been linked. And there'll be a downtown machine also that he's going to be relocating sometime. So much appreciation to Roy and John for helping with the K6RR and ARES communications. And back to Bruce.
Comments on that? They won't be linked all the time. As far as I know, from I talked with Roy that we will be able to link them and unlink them. So when we have an event or a drill or anything else going on, we can tie those two repeaters together. So we'll get coverage all over the whole county, a lot better than we're getting now. And there's some other things going as well. The other repeater is a VHF repeater. It's on 147.060, 147.060 with the same PL 107.2. And right now that's at Roy's house. Works very well. Covers Chula Vista and the South Bay area very well. So use it.
Thank you, Dave.
Looked like John might have had his hand raised.
No, Dave covered the comment I was going to make.
Perfect, thank you. All right, other announcements while we're here. Today is a very important day. It is 7/11, which means that if you are brave enough, bold enough, and maskable enough, you can go to your local 7-Eleven store and get a small, free, refreshing Slurpee, which ought to help keep you cool on these warm summer days. For those that weren't tracking or are not part of the WinLink email reflector, email went out either late yesterday or early this morning indicating the demise, if you will, of Winmore. So Winmore is no more. They have deprecated the actual protocol and the service. Formally, they've made the announcements. They're asking folks that are gateway partners to go out and remove the protocol as the future months roll ahead. And they're moving ahead with a different protocol that has surplaced or replaced it. So I don't think anyone in the group is really using Winmore, but I know a lot of the legacy operators that are out there, perhaps not within ARES, that may have had previous setups or previous configurations, may or may not be aware of that. So when they go to use it, it may not work is what it comes down to. One event that was not mentioned for an operating opportunity is next weekend. So July the 18th and 19th, starting at 11 o'clock local time on the 18th, which is Saturday morning, the July CQ Magazine worldwide VHF contest occurs. So it's a two-band event. It's very similar to what the ARRL events are, except that it's only 6 and 2 meters. So for a lot of folks, they have the capabilities within a multifunction HF rig, or they're all-in-one radios. They can do everything on one radio. The start time again is 11 o'clock Saturday the 18th. The end time is 2 p.m. on Sunday the 19th. So a little beyond 24 hours, not a very long event. And I got to be really honest with you, if you've got any kind of a multi-element 6-meter antenna, the 6-meter conditions lately have been extremely erratic. But for the folks that have digital capabilities, a reasonable antenna, and a reasonable radio setup with their computer for the digital nodes, we've had multiple Japanese, Asia, and European openings over the last 2 weeks. Like, candidly, some folks are claiming they haven't seen in better than 30 years. And again, bear in mind that 30 years ago, we didn't have the digital nodes. They were doing phone and CW back then. Some of these openings are weak enough that even CW may not work or would not work. So I wouldn't expect that if you've got an omnidirectional vertical antenna that you're going to sit out there and listen to people that are in Europe and hear people interacting with them, but it's always a remote possibility. So bear in mind on that stuff. Today we're going to go out and talk about a few items we want to review and revisit, especially lessons learned. I know last time we met, we talked a little bit about the June VHF contest. Didn't really get a lot of feedback from the folks that participated. I'm hoping that we can really dig in a little bit deeper for field day, talk about what we did, what we experienced, what we ran for equipment specifically, things that worked as expected, things that didn't work as expected, challenges that you overcame, and then maybe memorable contacts or periods of time throughout that. And also talk about some of the other on-the-air events while we get there. But before we do that, let's go back to a piece that we haven't done in a while. Dun, dun, dun. Let's do the comedy stop first. Any questions about the fact that 2020 is probably missing this one critical item? Do we think? So for those that were paying attention to the National Weather Service, which I hope you were, we've got the beginning, although it was warm yesterday as well, we've got the beginning of a 3-day event, fairly significant. We want to make sure that, we're all doing the right things. And, it's kind of hard not to do that when you're effectively being told to stay home and not really go out and about, and not really go out and do things publicly. So I think this is kind of a double whammy for us. So heat indexes, heat warnings, especially for the backcountry, very significant. What they did not mention was anything about increased fire danger or fire risk. I didn't see anything get promoted or published for that. Doesn't look like we have a wind event associated with this, but whenever we have heat,
Lost audio.
Bruce, we cannot hear you.
how about now?
Now you're good.
Okay, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, last we heard was like a fire season starting.
Interesting. Okay. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened. It looked like it shifted audio devices on my computer. Again, not expecting this to be a wind event. There were no published notifications that I saw for increased fire risk or danger. However, whenever the temperatures get to be like this, we know that anything that starts anything will cause other issues, and it'll have a ripple effect. So for those trying to go out and stay cool and try to keep a lid on what you're doing, remember that back in the days when there was this thing called Super Mario 3, and there was one level where the sun was always trying to kill you, and that will be today, tomorrow, and Monday. So my advice is to go out and stay hydrated as much as you can. And when you stay hydrated, there's nothing more refreshing than the old vinyl reinforced garden hose pouring out that cool, refreshing liquid, right? For those that have problems listening to me today, if you need to go out and get your stereo to mono converter, we have this available for you at a modest cost. We'll go out and take the funds and put them into the ARES coffer. And for all of those that are complaining about everything else going bad with their Wi-Fi and their ferrites and everything else, remember that you could be looking at something like this instead.
And we're not seeing any change in pictures here on your
Really?
screen.
What screen
Yep.
are we on?
We're still on the agenda.
Really? So I've been talking all this time for no darn reason.
Yeah, we haven't seen a thing change.
Well, thank you for letting me know. Stand by on that. Let's see how we play this one out.
There we go.
Well, fun times, and you've missed all the good stuff here, so
Absolutely.
darn it.
Rewind.
Are you able to see the current screen?
Yes.
What screen do you think I'm on?
Star Wars.
Well, okay, wrong, but close. So politically, we don't really dig into this, but I think this is the most appropriate Star Trek slide that we could ever possibly put out there. That's too
Dave,
bad.
I want this slide so bad.
You
Could
missed.
could you put the previous one up for a second, please?
Let's go back to the beginning because this will be fun.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's better.
So you know what 2020 is missing, right? Needless to say, I was wondering why nobody was chuckling. Although you should be muted, I was wondering. Again, temperature forecast, we talked about that. Hopefully you heard most of the audio for it. Again, seriously, today, tomorrow, and Monday at the very minimum, specifically stressful heat days, and especially if you're in the backcountry. We talked about Super Mario 3. You couldn't see the graphics, so it didn't make any sense. And there was a level in that where the sun was out there and you were in the desert with no resources and the sun was trying to kill you, which is why the sun is angry. The official sports drink that'll take care of that, the vinyl reinforced garden hose, which most of us have lived to tell the tale on and probably makes us to some degree COVID immune. For those that need
Again.
Lost audio again, Bruce.
to go out and buy something for the friends and their family, the stereo to mono converter. How is the audio?
You're cutting
great.
in and out.
How about now?
Good.
I just got a warning that my internet connection is unstable, which is interesting because I'm not doing anything to make it unstable. Audio okay right now?
Yes.
Thank
Roger
you.
that.
Okay. So we were talking about other crises that could be amongst us and with us. And this is the story of the catastrophic proportions from my childhood on a regular, reoccurring basis. Very stressful. And then we go to the COVID thing. And that's about as political as we're going to get for this session. For people with cats, I think this speaks largely. My humans canceled their trips, so I had to cancel my plans to lie down on the counter and shred the couch. And he's right, the pandemic is having a major ripple effect. Here's your word of the day for those wanting to learn a different language, German in this case. I think that's J most of the time. For those that
That's me.
yeah, for those that think FT8 is all great, I got to remind you, there's another mode out there. And good morning to Christy. For those who are wondering, this is actually not the picture you think it is. This is actually Dave and I listening to the latest ARRL bulletin so we can go out and provide all that important information to you all. Dave is the blonde guy.
I was.
For those that are confined in quarantine, and I know this is not anyone that I know, there's also the Matrix Marriage Edition. And that's pretty much all I've really got. So with that, I'll say hello and goodbye. All right, back to the regular agenda. It's not quite the same when you have everyone on mute, but we'll get through this. So let's talk about, and I'm hoping that everybody's seeing the agenda slide again.
Agenda's up.
Thank you. Any other comments, thoughts, feedback about the June VHF contest from those who participated?
One comment on VHF is that it was nice having some summiteers up in the mountains that gave us 1 or 2 extra grid squares while they were simultaneously doing soda.
It's good to hear. The overwhelming feedback that I had, not just from a few folks here in San Diego, but regionally, was that hats off for the folks in San Diego and the San Diego section and ARES in general that has been working repetitively at having these little on-the-air events that we've been doing over the last many months. And the fact that that drove a lot of the participation. I had consistent feedback in that both for the VHF event as well as field day that there was a VHF presence. And again, particularly on 2 meters, but 440 as well, like we haven't seen in Southern California for probably a couple of decades. There were actual field day comments that were throughout social media from a variety of folks in and around Southern California, from Santa Barbara down to the Mexico border. And a lot of those comments were effectively that they made more contacts for field day from their 1 Delta stations on 2 meter FM than they did on HF. And seriously, that was a reoccurring comment. So that speaks large volumes to the fact that we've been able to go out and get folks interested, get people on the air, have people experimenting with their gear, whether it's from home, portable, mobile, from the summits, or the soda operators like Rob had just mentioned. Pretty exciting stuff. And it's been reflected in a positive way throughout a lot of different forums. Everybody keep doing the good work. This is part of what we're practicing for. I know it's busy work or it's fun hobby stuff, depending on how you look at it, but it's also good practice. So a lot of things came out of that event in field day and both VHF. Super good recognition for the San Diego section and rallying folks and getting folks on the air for the rally events. So all cool stuff. So let's talk about field day. And I'm really, and Dennis, I've got you. I really want to talk about what people did, what kind of station equipment they had set up. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, just, you know, even 60 seconds, quick rundown recap, if it can be that short. And talk about, again, what you found that you weren't expecting to find, or what occurred that you didn't expect to occur. And then usually, again, I like to go out and lament a little bit on the most interesting aspect of field day, which is what was the coolest thing that happened, either a contact person that you reached, place that you didn't expect to be able to contact from a distance perspective, etc. And Dennis, why don't you go ahead and go first? You had your hand raised. Unless you had a question. Dennis.
Okay. Hopefully you're hearing me now.
Now you're good.
Okay. First of all, on the June VHF contest, I was kind of disappointed. I went out and bought a dual band MFJ beam and stuck it up about, I don't know, probably 14 feet and aimed it north, hoping to get some grid squares to the north of us. But disappointingly, I think I only got 1. And it turns out that both my multi-band radios were showing high SWR signals, despite the fact that the antenna analyzer was telling me I was 1.2 to 1 across the band. So I have an issue there somewhere, which I have to figure out. Then as regards to field day, or actually back on June VHF, I echo the comments that you mentioned, which was got a lot of VHF, UHF contacts, which I enjoyed. And then that carried on over into field day, where I didn't get much in the way of HF. In fact, I never heard either you or Rob over the weekend, which I typically run into 2 or 3 times. So I had fun dabbling in it. Didn't spend 24 hours in front of the radio, but did have fun. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? We could have Rob talk about how famous he was since he got published.
Yeah, that was for field day. That sort of found somebody that was willing to publish something. Of course, you get the bonus points just for submitting something, but it's just, you know, double joy when they actually publish something. So that was very nice. Hey, Bruce, we have 2 hands up.
I'll let you arbitrate on the participants raising hands if you don't mind.
Okay, in alphabetical order, let's go with Chris first.
All righty, thanks. Yeah, my field day was on a summit here in Arizona. I'm at my cabin right now, and we had a few contacts. My surprise was on Saturday, the conditions were a lot tougher than I thought. I mean, I was running 100 watts on a summit over here and at about 9,500 feet, and it was tough breaking into some of the pileups. On Sunday, I was just setting up as it was shutting down, but on Sunday I got basically enough points to make Mountain Goat for Summits on the Air.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Hey, next is Frank.
Okay, yeah, Frank, NB1Z. Boy, I enjoyed field day, quite an adventure there. And I did end up using my Mac. I started to switch to the PC version, but there wasn't enough time to make the transition. So I stuck with Mac Logger, and it was really easy. So, and I use the FT991A that I have here. And I did work some 2 meters, 440 FM a little bit, but most of my time was on 80 meters and 40 meters. What an adventure. I think the biggest highlight was staying up the middle of the night and into the early morning and watching all of the propagation change. You could see the East Coast and then the Midwest come in. So you could sort of follow the gray line, and worked a lot of contests. I think I had 80 contacts on 80 meters and quite a few on 40 meters. Big adventure. Most of my time was on FT8. That was kind of fun. I have an inverted V in the backyard, so I think I'm going to get that inverted V up a little higher, get the ends away from the ground, and HF will be even more fun there. So that was my big adventure, and I did get my logs submitted to the ARRL, and so I'm good to go, ready for next year.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Next is Jay with comments.
Okay, I didn't spend as much time as Frank did, but I did get on the air for a few hours on Saturday and a few hours on Sunday. It was fun. It was interesting to see how many I could contact. Bruce, your recollection, your supposition about the 1 Delta stations, very much the case. You know, calling CQ didn't seem to do anything for me anyway. Everybody was paying attention to the big guns out there. So a little hunt and pounce. I did a few things. Frank, since you submitted your log, I may ask you for El Marine on the converter to Cabrillo, because I also use MacLogger DX. I didn't bother to change. I figured I would give it a live try, and that worked pretty well. Learned some things about propagation, and you know, especially the 10:30 to 11 a.m. pileups on Sunday morning was interesting. So good learning experience. resulted in me trying horizontal versus vertical polarization, and ended up buying a 2-port tuner so I could switch that more easily and not endanger things. That's it. Questions?
Cool.
Jay,
Thank-
thank you. Next is Munir.
Hey, so for field day, I tried to do a soda activation, but it didn't really work out so well. So ultimately, I ended up going to the park a couple blocks from my house, and I did one Bravo for a few hours there, and then another couple hours on Sunday morning, and mostly on FT8 with like solar and battery. And I tried to do it with QRP, and I got like 12. According to the log, I got like 12 QSOs, but I guess, and I think I did pretty well. I think next year I want to try to do more, hopefully find somewhere where I can hang out for longer than a couple hours. So we'll see how that goes.
Thank you, Munir. Next is Pat.
Good morning. Well, I worked both the VHF contest and field day pretty hard, but didn't do too well. But the first thing I found, 20 meters was absolutely useless on FT8. Unless you were running a kilowatt, you weren't going to work anybody. I worked one station on FT8. So I went over to FT4 and I managed to squeak out a few more stations. And then I tried 28 megs, 21 megs, and more 21 megs. And then I went up to 6 meters where I worked a whole bunch of people locally. I worked more on 6 meters locally than I did on the low bands. And then the next day I worked quite a few on 80 meters and then some on 21 megs. And towards the end of the contest, worked quite a few on FM, but didn't really concentrate on that because too busy on FT8. You really almost need a 2-operator station to run FM and FT8 at the same time. So mostly just spent the time on FT8. And we sent in our replies for both field day and the VHF contest, and they're going to absolutely hate me at headquarters because we sent them all in on paper. So they're not going to be too thrilled to get my paper logs and try to read my chicken scratching. And we'll see how it comes out in the results. I'm probably going to be last place in 1D on field day. But at least we were there for most of the time. Over.
Thank you, Pat. Great comments. Back around to Frank.
Hey, boy, I had a terrible time on 20 meters also. So I agree with Pat there. I think maybe I heard Pat on 6 meters, but we didn't get connected in time. And also, I worked 25 sections. That's what I wanted to say. How did everybody else do working sections?
I got 30 states. Alaska to Hawaii.
I haven't counted, but I probably didn't get that many. I was in it for having fun and learning stuff, and you know, if I get something for playing the game, that's great. But didn't have enough time to get that serious.
So comments for me, I was running 1B in Alpine, and it seemed like I could hear New England, I could hear the East Coast, but they could not hear me. So it was like it was a one-way propagation going one way, but not the other way. Inconvenience in the middle was that my rig control stopped working. So I had to remember every time to shift band to change my logger software, make sure that I changed the logging band also. And I had 3 times more contacts on Sunday morning than I did on Saturday afternoon.
Very good. Anyone else?
Yeah, this is Kevin, K6KMH. I had already planned to go out to our house in Prescott that weekend. So I took my Go box and my buddy pole and I drug my son along, KJ6BXN, who's never operated HF. We set up in the backyard. We chose not to go out to any place public because, well, it's Arizona right now. And set up a 20-meter vertical, operated for a little over a half hour till the wind took down our antenna. We had a twister come through. other loose pieces in the back patio were flying around the yard. So we called it a day, but he got a lot out of it. So that was my excitement. I did hear, interestingly enough, I didn't hear anybody on the West Coast. We were able to get Northwest and Southwest QSOs. I did hear somebody, I think in the Northwest, making a QSO with Stephen, KC6MIE, but I couldn't hear Stephen. Heard nobody out of San Diego, but then I can't reach Prescott from my home in Valley Center either, seems to be. But good learning experience, and it was great to be able to take my son along and get him involved in his first field day event.
Very good.
We have a hand up. Stephen, go ahead.
All right. Good morning, everybody. On the VHF party, of all the VHF parties that I've worked over the years, I don't think I've ever talked to anybody coming from, we're in Fallbrook, so San Bernardino, Northeast, that section. I can get over that area into Nevada, Idaho, Utah, etc. But coming from that, and then the other way down in San Diego, I rarely talk to anybody on 2, 440, or 6 from San Diego on these QSO parties or these contests. I think that's interesting. I talk more to Santa Barbara, that area. So I guess it's the Fallbrook is right in the middle and everything is shooting over us. That's the only thing I can think of. Anyway, but it's all good. And then the field day, I agree with Rob. You know, it was like a diode. We were hearing beautifully from East Coast, Midwest to us, but they could not hear us, or they weren't hearing me. And I tried, and I stayed on the air pretty much till 2 in the morning on Sunday. And then I woke up at 6 and was back on the air until 11. So I was probably working about 80%, 85% of the time period, but I ended up with 174 contacts, 70 were phone, and 104 were digital. And then one of my 6-meter contacts I talked to, Gordon, he was up in Orange County, and he was my only 6-meter, nothing on 2 or 440, and that was on sideband. So, but it's interesting. Every contest gives a little bit different challenges, but anyway, it was fun overall.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else? Especially about field day. Anyone else?
I see Frank has his hand up again. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I had a question on FT8. I did better calling CQ than I did responding to individuals. That worked for me. Maybe I need to get my antenna system more balanced, but that was the strategy I used, and that got me a lot of points.
All right, good deal. I thought I saw maybe another couple of hands raised, Rob.
Jay, go ahead.
Your comment about the rig control breaking and having to enter all that stuff manually, that was sort of my downfall on one of the early events, which is why I, the VHF, one of the VHF rallies, I had to type all that stuff by hand because my old VHF radio wouldn't do rig control. error prone and tedious. So if you have the opportunity to do the rate control portion, absolutely, positively do it.
Thank you, Jay. And back to Pat.
Yeah, I lost probably half of the contacts on FT8 to folks responding to me and then never completing the QSO. If they don't send back an RR73, it doesn't get logged. So it's considered a SOL QSO. And so I'd have had twice as many contacts if folks would have sent back the RR73s.
A question for Pat. So on FT8, how many times do you try to complete a call before you give up or contact?
I try about 4 times, and then I figure that they're ignoring me, or I and move on to further territories, because all that wasted time just because that takes about 4 minutes when you call a station 4 times and he doesn't answer. In that amount of time, he could have connected up with somebody else.
And the same for if you start an exchange and it doesn't complete, you give them like 4 chances, then move on.
Roger? Roger?
Thank you, Pat.
I ended up doing the same thing.
Frank, that's your method also, like 4 times and then move on?
Yeah, I tried maybe 5 times, and then as the contest went on, I went down to 4, maybe 3 times. So, but 4 I think is typical. It seemed to work.
Thank you, Frank. Back to Bruce.
Okay, thanks. So from our side, we ran Whiskey 6 Foxtrot again, like we have been doing traditionally. The station that was set up was 5 Bravo. We had 5 stations set up, battery power, and we went QRP. We didn't go 100 watts, we went QRP. Very challenging is what I'll say. The, you know, from the perspective of trying to do this the right way and keep it legit, we probably did more than that. We had, for 80 meters as an example, we had an 80-meter delta loop strung from some trees at about 40 or so feet, and that was fed with almost 350 feet of ladder line that varied in elevation from inches above ground, dirt, concrete, pavement, to maybe 5, 6, 7 feet, you know, running along fences and between bushes, things like that, and finally terminating into a little tiny 4-to-1 LDG ball in the feed the radio. For the other antennas that we had up, we went out and had a portable trailer mounted antenna for 10, 15, and 20, and also 6 meters. We had hundreds of feet of RG8 with BNC connectors and BNC couplers, because that's what we had to get the antenna situated. It was as crazy as you could make it. And then going QRP was challenging as well. We had 2 new operators that had not really ever done field day before, so we were kind of teaching them the ropes while we were going. We ran the entire 24-hour event, so 5 Bravo, 24 hours, all bands between 160 meters and 70 centimeters. And I think that what we observed was fairly telling. The conditions were not great. Most people will attest to that. The challenge I think a lot of people were facing was with the 1 Delta stations running 100 watts or more, and some of them running, you know, close to legal limit in many cases. You know, it's going to desense what you're able to go out and talk to. You might be able to hear these folks, but even at 100 watts, talking 100 miles, 1,000, or a couple of thousand miles, it's going to be really difficult for them to hear you if they're putting out 500,000 2kW from a home station, and they've got other stations in and around their area in whatever geographic region they're in, and you're out there running 100 watts, or like we were, 5 watts or so, into these horrible feed line losses and antennas. So exceptionally challenging from that perspective, and I figured it would be the 1 Delta stations pretty much being their own undoing, and it seemed to come true from that perspective.
Hey, Bruce, what was your operating location?
we were up in Vista, just shy of the foothills. We were up in the Vista area. We did not do well on VHF. Everybody else did great. We heard lots of activity. We heard probably what I would characterize as hundreds of different stations on and off throughout the event that were up in the LA area and Orange County. The problem was at 5 watts, feeding a vertical antenna that was up at about 45 or 50 feet through about 150 feet of feed line, we realized that other than locals and some very strong stations or catching people when it was quiet, we could never get through the local chatter that was Orange County. And we could certainly not get through all of the local chatter that was LA, LAX to get to Santa Barbara. So we could hear Santa Barbara. We could hear a number of stations that were further up. We heard folks that were in Ventura on and off. Lots of the clubs that were in LA, LAX, almost all of the folks that were on and off in Orange County, and just a handful or so here in San Diego. The location just apparently didn't favor that, but you know, with all sincerity, I think if we made 30 contacts on 2 meters, which is where I think we were at, that was a lot. And I think we made probably a dozen or so on 70 centimeters on FM. That was a lot. We didn't really do tremendously in there, but we did get Delaware, which was very important. Most of the operations, most of the operations on HF ended up being digital. We couldn't battle it out on phone. Even duking it out with the people that were running 100 watts wasn't working. And candidly, with all of the 1 Delta stations out there that were running 100 watts or more, and some of them again is, you know, mid legal limit, if not full legal limit, we couldn't get a word in edgewise. So even doing search and pounce wasn't happening. So we ended up reverting to digital. I would say probably 90% of the operations on HF ended up being FT8 or FT4. And on 40 meters in particular, FT4 going into Saturday night through early Sunday AM hours was very profitable. So you lose a little bit of sensitivity in the protocol from FT8, but the fact that you can work people faster and move on, especially for people like Pat had mentioned, when they're transitory, if they're there for a couple of seconds or even a couple of minutes and you miss them in the sequence, there's a good chance you're not going to go out and work a lot of people. So there were, even for us, misses that we had, not a whole lot of them. And like other folks had commented, we usually would let go if it was something that we needed for a section. We would go 4 to 6 cycles. We'd actually burn that much time. So 15 seconds times 4, you can do the math. Waiting appropriately, so you're burning a couple of minutes just trying to go out and get them to go out and be engaged or complete the QSO itself. But on FT4, grinding it out at, you know, 7.5 seconds per cycle, we were able to get a lot more done.
Hey, Bruce, you ready to take some raised hands?
Yeah, in a second. The numbers were actually pretty good. So I think 40 meters was the most productive band. 20 meters was great. We did fine on 20 meters. Probably had about a half a dozen or so contacts on 160, missed a lot there. 15 and 10 made contacts, just not a whole lot of them. It just wasn't very productive. 15 was much drier than we expected. And I'll let you call out for the raised hands.
Okay, let's, several hands up. Let's go to Pat first.
Okay, thank you. One of the things about FT8 is you're watching the waterfall and trying to find a place to transmit, and you look for a dark area where there's nothing, seems like nothing's happening. And so I'd plant there for a little while, and if that worked, and if it didn't work, that meant there was probably a station there that I couldn't see that was out of the skip zone. So I did a lot of hopping around. In fact, with every QSO, I would probably move 2 or 3 times trying to find a hole that I could sit in where the station that I was trying to work would hear me. So those holes look like they're holes, but they may not really be holes. Over.
Yeah, agreed. And sometimes when it's not profitable like that, you either ride it out or you continue going, because even though there might be someone outside the skip zone that is there and holding that spot, you also don't know what's closer to you that you could be working. And I think in your case, Pat, where you expressed the fact that you had a whole bunch of misses, you know, I think the disproportionate power levels could have had a whole lot to do with that. I don't have any doubt that you were able to talk much, much further than other people were able to get back with you on, considering that you were, you know, you were running your amplifier for this. So I think that's a normal phenomenon. It's not an unexpected outcome. Other hands, other questions, Rob?
So next up is Stephen, KC6MIE.
I'll make sure I have it. Okay, Bruce, what class were you running on W6F?
5 Bravo.
Oh, because I made one contact with you, and that was on 80 meters digital, and I have you down at 1 Delta, so I have to go in and change that. So
Yeah, we were certainly not 1 Delta.
okay,
I'm hoping nobody else pirated the call over Field Day weekend, because we had that happen once where somebody submitted a log by mistake under W6F, and we had to battle it out with the folks at the ARRL to get them to resend that so we could actually send in our log to make it a official log. That was crazy.
well, hopefully that's not the case, because I did see you W6F numerous times on, but I think obviously I only worked you one time. So okay, thanks.
No worries. Other questions?
Your 80 meter station didn't want to talk to me.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. That was one of the newer operators. He was working at a slightly slower pace, so I don't know whether he was jumping around or whether something else was going on.
Next is Jay with a comment.
Yeah, I also saw you, but couldn't work here about minus 20, and usually minus 20 is something I'm not going to be able to do an exchange on. But good to hear that you were up there. Figured you were up in Vista someplace. That's all.
Very good. Other questions? So the big reveal, because I've still got to go out and put the logs in for the VHF station. When you're running 5 Bravo, you don't get a free VHF. The VHF counts as another radio. That's why we ended up with 5. Otherwise, it would have been 4. We've got to put the VHF logs in, but the head count at the end of the event was almost 800 contacts, and we had 69 sections. So I got to tell you that for those that said QRP wasn't worth it and doing it at QRP levels wasn't ever going to happen, I beg to differ. I mean, we did this with literally hundreds of feet of feed line, super lossy getting a signal into an antenna, and we still had almost 800 contacts and, like I said, 69 sections. So it was an experiment, to be honest with you folks. I mean, that's what we were doing was, you know what, let's try to do something completely different. We've joked about doing QRP for a number of years. We finally decided just to go ahead and make it happen. And again, when we found out that it wasn't going to work out on phone because it wasn't going to be profitable that way, battling it out, we pretty much went to digital. So with that, this was, if anybody saw my Facebook comments on this very briefly, I made a note on there that this was probably the largest crowdsourced public trial and troubleshooting test for any ham radio software package that's ever been developed. And speaking specifically about WSJT, we were out there like everybody else, and I'm not joking, we were on the internet with everyone else trying to figure out why once every half an hour to an hour to 2 hours, one of the computers running WSJT would just crash and burn with the application. Why the application would stop running abruptly, why it would leave parts of a screen on, why it would look like it's going through the motions but not. And we figured out, along with a lot of other people, that part of it was the volume of stations that were potentially being decoded despite the fact that they were within the capability of the machine. Effectively, it was burning up something internally in a process and causing the application to die. So turning off things that would normally be run from the decode perspective, you know, taking it out of the deep decode and putting it on fast instead, dropping the enable AP, which is something that, you know, depending on what you're running for mode, which is like an early alert, it's trying to read into the packet. Sometimes it'll cause false decodes. We were doing all of the things other people were doing to try to keep the software alive. And that included, in a couple of cases, having to go out and basically throw the software out, reload it, and reset it back up. What was frustrating about that was that we had to go out and reset up all the parameters. I mean, when the stuff bombed, it bombed badly. And we had to go out and put in the call signs, put in the section stuff again, put in the field day exchanges, had to change all the colors for highlighting so we knew who we had worked versus who we had not. But by the time we got done with the event at 24 hours, we were pretty proficient at that. But yeah, it wasn't just us. Everybody had that problem. So we're on 2.2.2. The joke was probably in the subsequent couple of weeks, we're probably going to see at least a point, if not a small major on the release side to go out and fix some of that once they get the feedback from all the other folks. But it was absolutely probably the largest crowdsourced field test of any ham radio package that's ever been used on the air, period. It was just an astonishing thing. So any other feedback or comments for field day? If you don't have any, I want to remind folks, I'm going to make the cutoff tomorrow. So if I don't have your log submitted by midnight or by 11:59 tomorrow night, I'm not going to consider you to be in the running for one of the book prizes that Dave, the section manager, has. And the prize was specifically for those who have submitted their log to the ARRL under ARES. So your participating club would have been SDG ARES, and whoever had the highest section count would be the recipient of that. And obviously I disqualify myself and our station, so I'm not in the running. So again, 11:59 tomorrow night will be the cutoff, and I'll start looking at the logs that were sent to me, and we'll work it from there and make the announcements. Any other questions about field day?
I did. I sent you something that was not Cabrillo format. I haven't done that conversion yet. Do you want me to basically figure out what I'm going to send to the ARRL and then send you a copy of that?
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay.
And I know you did it in good faith, so I've got your stuff. You're okay.
And for what it's worth, the problem that I had with FT8 was not that it would crash on the Mac. Say with the WSJT, what I did observe was that sometimes it would just transmit and keep transmitting, and the cycle would change from receive, and the radio still said transmit. So that was a failure that I observed. I don't know if anybody else saw that.
I think we had that happen a couple of times as well, where the interface stayed up and the radio was in transmit. I think you're right. We had that happen a couple of times. All right, cool. Let's move on.
Hello?
Was there another question before we keep going?
Yeah.
Pat had another question in there.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Pat.
I found a serious bug in WSJT. If you try to send a free message, and I saw Arnie and Chip Margelli on our N6HC on 6 meters, so I worked them. So I sent back a QC message to him saying, "Happy field day, Arnie." And then I tried to call CQ, and all it sent was happy field day, Arnie, over and over and over again until I turned off the WSJTX and restarted it, and then it worked again. So that's a real bug in the software that if you try to send a free message, it won't revert back to regular CQs. Over.
Well, maybe what was really going on was your computer was really happy to see Arnie, and it wanted to tell him over and over and over again. Maybe that's what happened.
Roger.
Anyway. All right, so moving on. Rob, I'm going to ask you for a poll, and it's going to be very easy. The poll will be yes or no. It'll be a yes or no poll that'll be coming up here. So let's talk really briefly about a look back to 2019. Talk about our current capabilities and potentially our changing mission, and also the look forward to 2021, 2022. So if this was actually 2019 we would be talking about future events. We'd be talking about participation in other community events. We'd be talking about the Miramar Air Show. We would even be talking about the November hospital drill. Obviously, most of those things are either in flux and or have been canceled and probably will be for the foreseeable future. So I saw an interesting comment in social media, and I saw a couple of other comments that were very similar in a different platform, talking about what ARES does for different sections around the country. And people were contributing on the perspective of San Diego, and effectively the comments were, San Diego's mission is to support the healthcare community in the hospitals, and we work for this agency, and this is what we do. While that seems to be a large part of what we've been participating in, you know, I think that maybe the broader definition is that, you know, we do effectively what it is we're asked to do by our served agencies or those asking for support within the capabilities of our team and our group. So it's broader to me than supporting the hospitals or the medical operations center. It's broader to me than supporting, you know, the sheriff's department or helping with the RACES or ACS functions. It's broader to me than supporting some of these other, you know, point events, if you will, or things that we do. So I want to kind of bring it back to what we should be doing, and this is what we really should be doing. I mean, we're ARES members, we are ARES volunteers, but first and foremost, you know, here we are in July of 2020. We've got absolutely unprecedented events that have happened around us and exploded in all sorts of different manners over the last several months. We've got COVID. We've got, you know, a variety of other threats that have been brought in and talked about, from biological to, you know, various insect life. We've got folks talking about how we have other contagions that are suddenly out there that we haven't observed. We've now got protests, we've got riots, we've got political upheaval. We've got areas of the country where, and I'm trying not to make this political, folks, so bear with me. We've got areas of the country where suddenly the police are under attack, which, you know, most folks consider to be our primary defensive layer for the public at large. And we've got groups of people that in some cases appear by the local governments and regions to be left unchecked in things that they're doing in their areas, whether it's tearing down statues or spraying graffiti. And in some cases, to be fair, in some cases where it's perfectly peaceful and it's a protest, which I understand people will want to do, and it's within their rights as an American in this country to do. They are allowed that freedom. But somewhere, you know, sometimes things are crossing what most of us consider to be the boundaries, and we end up in a place where we don't want to be, and things start sliding another direction. You know, we're ARES. What are we going to do? So for the poll that Rob is going to take numbers on and that I'd like you to participate in, considering that we're in the midst of COVID season right now, and we may actually not be out of COVID season for a long time. I think I already have a good feel for this, but I just want to have a completely candid response to the following question. If we had a call out for the hospitals and regional folks that we support under that premise with the MOC, it could be a senior living facility, it could be a skilled nursing facility, it could be a hospital, it could be a clinic. If we had a call out, how many of our folks that we have on this meeting today, yes or no, would be part of that call out? It's a simple binary answer. And again, I've already got kind of a gut feeling on this because I've already watched feedback where I know people have been quite literally so concerned that they're not leaving their homes unless they absolutely need to. And I'm not debating, or I'm not going to debate the validity of those concerns or the applicability. That's within everyone's right to go out and do what they think is best for themselves and their family. But if we had a call out, would you go today? And it's not a conditional thing. It's if we had a call out. Let's make presumptions that you'll have PPE provided at the hospital. You'll have probably a location that isn't necessarily going to be anywhere where you could potentially be impacted by someone that could be infectious. But you know what? With all the best of intentions, we know how this is rolling right now. So would you go or would you not go? So I want to focus while we're taking the poll on what we're doing to take care of ourselves and family. And we should be just like every other season in Southern California. We should be doing all of the normal things for stockpiling things that we need. And stockpiling is not a gentle word. If we have medications that we need, do we have a 30, 60, 90-day supply of our medications that we personally need? Or are we living literally on a 30-day by 30-day or month by month supply because either our healthcare plan doesn't afford us to go out and buy in bulk or get a multi-month distribution? Do we have things that are non-prescription that you know you need on a reoccurring basis that you're only able to buy because you've got financial limitations that cause that to happen? Or maybe, candidly, like toilet paper and paper goods, in the earlier months of this, you can't find the supplies anymore. Food, water, the normal things that we're told by FEMA and by common sense living in Southern California that you should have available as a minimum staple item in case there's a major disruption of service like an earthquake where certain things may be impacted. You know, so aside from ham radio capabilities, are we really prepared? And if you haven't downloaded or looked at or have a copy of the latest FEMA checklist, I got to be honest with you, I can remember many years ago, I mean, when I say many years, I'm talking about no more than 10. You know, the FEMA checklist was on a single-sided magnet that could stick on the side of your refrigerator. And granted, that might have been an abbreviated version, but notwithstanding, here's everything that you should have. You could check it off with a grease pencil or a non-delible marker, whatever else, and you would know what you've got available. If you look at the FEMA checklist for what you should have these days, much more significant. You should be thinking about what that situational status is going to be if we have an actual call out, because we could have a fire, we could have a disruption of service that's non-medical where we don't have to respond to the hospitals. We may have some other type of call out. Are you going to be able to leave folks at home? Are they going to be okay being left at home? Do you have what you need to go out and support the mission if you go mobile? So things to be thinking about. So I look at this as almost a fight or flight type of deal. And I'm also looking at current and regional events, which are interesting. Certainly there's a lot of other emotions that I could express, but I won't, because it'll start getting probably biased and maybe even political very fast, and that's not for this forum. So there was a lot of things that happened in different regions of the country where we saw protesting, we saw riots, we saw upheavals that were well beyond even what we would consider to be acceptable behavior in most people's minds for a protest. And if you're in one of those areas that's affected like this, are you going to lock the doors, bar the windows? Are you going to hunker down? Do you have the capability to safely shelter in place, or are you going to be challenged with a tough decision to pick up what you have, just like as if it were a fire that might be threatening your property? Are you going to be able to pick up what you have, what you need, what's most important, and necessary supplies, be able to get into a vehicle and then go somewhere safe that's outside of that area, providing that you have roads to be able to do it and there's not other interruptions preventing that from happening. So consider, if you're going to be sheltering in place and you're going to hunker down, a lot of people do have basic radio staples at home, but they expect to be operating from a better location sometimes. Maybe they expect to be operating from a hilltop. Maybe they expect to be operating from an MOC. Maybe they expect to be operating from some other EOC or other location where they have more advanced radio gear or capabilities. So if you're going to be sheltering in place, if you think that you're going to be hunkering down, you think you're going to go out and make it for the long haul, which could be, hopefully, if it's something that's minor, maybe no more than a couple of days, consider improving your current station setup. And what does that mean? Do you have battery power? How much battery power do you have? Do you have a generator? How large is it? What can it run? How much fuel do you have? Do you have antennas to support your radios that you have? I know a lot of folks that have Go boxes and Go kits, and in some cases they have a VHF capability within their Go kit, but yet they don't have a VHF antenna or antennas at their homes to go out and use. Are there HF antenna improvements that you could have? Do you have your operational guides handy? Do you have your message handling forms in your gear? And most importantly, perhaps, I know everybody is in the midst of worlds of electronics, whether it's your cell phone, your tablet, your computer, whatever it happens to be, but I'm still a real stickler to having at least some of that informational element on paper where it's not tied to a device that may or may not work, may or may have broken, may or may not have power, may or may not have internet connectivity. So obviously I've got everything that I want downloaded to multiple places on my computers, on my tablets, on my phones, but you know, good grief, what if that stuff doesn't work? Can you go back to paper and pull it off? I would hope so. And I don't want you printing reams of paper, but it's always good to have at least some of the basics somewhere and printed out. Make sense? And then option number 2, which we were sort of just talking about, you know, if it's a threat to your area, and it could be fire. We usually talk about fire being one of the biggest issues. If you're in an area where they tell you to evacuate, you know, they want you out, and it's the same effect. Are you going to be able to grab what you need, grab your important papers and materials, you know, grab important family photos or pictures? Maybe if you don't have them physically, you've got them digitized on a hard drive. Are you going to be able to go out and grab your personal meds and things like that? Anything that you need for your personal and your family and your pet's survival, and quickly get them into a vehicle and bug out. So, you know, your mobile Go kit, if you've got that, might be helpful. If you've already got radio gear in your vehicle, I would expect that to be a very good benefit for you. Do you and your family have that separation plan where if they're not home with you and you are able to contact them, or they aren't able to contact you, or they're told that they can't get to your area, do you have a secondary place to meet or land to find them? Do you have contact phone numbers for family members or other people? And usually the recommendation is someone outside the geographic area that you're in, sometimes even out of state, so they can relay messages back and forth and do things like that and not necessarily be impacted if they're in the area. And do you have enough stuff if you're going to bug out for your personal supplies, or even if you're going to stay in, to go out and last you 46 or 48, 96 hours? You know, it used to be that once upon a time, 48 hours was the window, 72 hours was the window. Now everybody's talking about 96 hours or more. So 4 days or more of supplies, not leaving the house, not doing anything else. And that's taking care of everything that you need. Meals don't have to be warm. It depends on what it is that you've got for consumables and what you've got for food. But I keep reminding my kids, just because it's in a can doesn't mean it has to be heated. In a lot of cases, it may not be quite as palatable, but it's certainly digestible, and that's the most important thing. So that's really what I had, and that's really all I wanted to kind of bring up and talk about. From the poll perspective, Rob, where did we land?
Yeah, we never announced the official kickoff of the vote. Did you want people to vote now?
Sure, we can do that. I'm sorry, I should have said that. My bad. I'm just
Okay,
really...
so for the people just joining us, to summarize, in case of an ARES call out, it's a would you maybe be available, and it's a yes, no. Please go ahead and vote now. And if you don't know where to find the button, look at your participants list, and down at the bottom there's a green check mark, that's the yes, or red X is the no. So please go ahead and vote now.
And when you're ready, Rob, it looks like we've got some raised hands as well.
Okay, to summarize, it looks like the majority are going to be available. A few people, for their own reasons, would not be able to deploy.
Okay, very good. It looks like there might have been some questions. I'll let you call them out, Rob.
Pat, did you have something? I saw your hand go up.
You might have been talking on mute, Pat. And you're muted again.
I was trying to vote yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Pat. Let's swing over for a comment from Bob, AI6KU.
Hey, you're muted, Bob.
Barely. Go ahead, Bob. Yeah, I'm afraid, Bob, you're not coming through very well. Hey, let's swing back to Bruce now.
Okay, and Bob, sorry, I wasn't able to make anything out. Maybe if you can summarize in the group chat, that would help. I really want folks to go out and think about what they've got and what they have and what they are normally prepared to go out and handle in case of an emergency. And again, this is what I would be doing annually anyway. We're about to go into what we consider to be the prime part of fire season. We just talked about temperatures, you know, especially this weekend, drying stuff out. So even if nothing were to happen, Craig Williams will tell you that this is one of those things that is a precipitating event or leading up to event. We dry a bunch of stuff out because the heat index and the heat in general is drying out even more. All of that extra stuff that we haven't had burn recently, that is now brand new fuel that we've acquired over the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years because we haven't had a major burn, which we never want, but unfortunately it's that ebb and tide cycle that we're dealing with. I'm especially concerned about disruption of services. We're at such a interesting place with the virus and things going on that if we have a power outage because we have heat like we do, extra drain on the electrical grid and electrical system, are we going to be able to get on the air and do things? Are we going to be able to use the internet if power is down for a sustained period of time in a local area? Are your cell phones going to work? We know how well that worked in a September of many, many years ago. It's more of a preparedness thought process because all of these things could always happen anyway. But now we've got this COVID and in some cases potential for civil disturbance issue as kind of additional vectors for things to be difficult or have to be dealt with. So we're adding a couple of additional layers of things that we need to be thinking about actively. And that's what I'm trying to express here from our preparedness perspective. Comments or feedback, other questions?
I do have a question from Craig.
Go ahead, Craig. Craig, you're muted. Lips are moving, but you're muted. Still muted. Usually if you're using the space bar, you got to push and hold. There you go. You were off, now you're on again. Off, on, off. Go now.
Okay, yeah, go now. All right, this shelter in place thing, based on my 15 years with the fire service, can be a very dangerous concept. So I suggest a couple things. Check with your, especially if you're in a backcountry like us, check with your local CAL FIRE, county fire station, have them come up and look at your place. See if it is safe to shelter in place there. Depends on your clearance a lot. And two, once you decide to do it, you better stay there. Most of the deaths in the '03 fire were people who wanted to shelter in place. Then they decided at the last minute it was getting too big for them, and they tried to drive through the fire and died. So very critical thing to think about.
I agree. Or it was a delayed response and being told to get out, and they delayed and deferred the decision and left late. For Bob, the question really was for the poll. It was, if we had a hospital related call out or a healthcare related call out, how many of our folks that we have as volunteers, and it was just a sample poll for the group that's on today. I know that we'd get different answers depending on how much larger we put this out there to the larger group. But for the folks that were on today, if we had a hospital call out in the midst of the COVID issues that we're still having, how many would go as opposed to how many would not go? It wasn't related to shelter in place. And for Craig, the other aspect of that was a piece of the dialogue. The stay or go was also related to, what if there's a civil disturbance in your area and you see a civil disturbance developing in your area? And obviously most of us will not. I would certainly hope most of the country would not, but where we've seen that happen in other regions of the country, would you make the decision to stay or go? And I'm not putting a poll out for that. I'm just asking people to think about it in the same context that we're thinking about other disasters where you might need to leave your home abruptly, and be thinking about the other things that you would need to do if it were a fire, comparing it to that as an event, and or other disaster where you're basically in peril if you're going to stay. Can you pick up your stuff? Can you pick up your family? Can you get your pets? Can you get all the necessities that go along with that, and be ready to bug out in a reasonable amount of time, or a safe amount of time to be able to get you out of potential danger? So it wasn't just related to fire. I agree with you. If you're going to stay and it's a fire scenario, that's something that needs to be calculated, weighed, and assessed very carefully. I hope that answers the question. Other questions or comments? Okay. I don't have anything else specifically for the agenda today. I'm hoping that the feedback, the lessons learned, especially working field day, were beneficial. One of the phenomenons that I really enjoy that someone did comment on earlier, to watch the gray line happen. You get to watch all that stuff change as far as propagation. Certainly that would have been far more exciting if we had had a better amount of propagation, which we didn't, but that's kind of where that was at. So it sounds like most people had a good time, most people enjoyed, and it was a good event from a learning experience. So I appreciate the fact that you folks were able to participate. Anything else for anyone else, or any other topics on the meeting before we close? I'll let you wrap it up then, Dave.
All right, you had asked me earlier.
Yeah, we should talk about that. Thank you for the prompt.
What other things are going on? And every Wednesday evening, I have a section managers meeting with up to the 71 section managers across the country. Thursday evening is section managers, SECs, and ASMs, and a few other people basically talking about ARES and how ARES is, if I can use their term, broken. Having worked with ARES in several locations over the last 30 plus years, I don't see that to be an issue. There are several extra sections across the country where the section managers cannot talk to their division directors. They don't get any response from them, and so on. And we do not have that problem. I didn't have that problem in Ohio. We don't have that problem here. One of the things the section managers are trying to do is come up with a national training plan or guidelines for ARES, realizing the fact that every section is going to be a little bit different. But there's still a lot of sections that there are a lot of amateurs that don't know how to turn on a radio, don't know how to make a call, don't know how to use a repeater. And they're starting off with that concept to try and come up with some good plans to put some videos together to do that. We are much further ahead of the game than that here. Our system seems to work very well. The only thing that we are lacking that I can see is actual reporting of time that we spend doing all this. But other than that, when we ask people to prepare for events until the COVID thing came up, we always had lots of people, lots of good volunteers, lots of good trained volunteers because of the training that Bruce and Rob have been doing throughout the last few years. We are very far ahead on WinLink. We have many WinLink operators that are very, very fluent in WinLink and very proficient with it, which is going to be a good thing to keep up with. There have been a lot of changes in WinLink over the last couple of years, and it's all going forward very well. I think with that, I'm just going to keep monitoring the situation that they're trying to do and bring anything that they really come up with to this group, and we'll share with our group whatever they think is needed. But from my standpoint, and talk with Dick Norton about where we are and so on, we are so far ahead of the curve and from a lot of sections that it just really pleases me at how everybody has done it. There are sections across the country where if you would ask people to take the ICS courses, they don't even want to talk to you. They don't want to do any additional training. They know everything already that they need to know. I'm a qualified operator. When you get out in the field and are actually operating under a real event, under real event situations, you may find that you really don't know as much as you thought you did. So it's time to get some good training and make sure that everybody understands that. The more you train, the more it'll become second nature when the event really happens. We've been having some events with the LAX Northeast section with Oliver. We did a Did You Feel It drill here last week with WinLink. Very short notice. Had a lot of people respond very quickly within the 2-hour time frame the USGS was looking for. They were very pleased. It went extremely well. So thank you for all that participated in that. And we'll continue to do more exercises like that with other sections. We're going to try and arrange some more just to work with our surrounding sections so that we are all on the same page. So when something does happen, and we know it will at some point, that we are all prepared to take care of it. Thanks, Bruce.
That was a good summary. Thank you, Dave. So, and to amplify what David mentioned, the parts that he didn't touch on was that, you know, most of what I've observed in these meetings is in a couple of hours of talking, the discussion usually becomes very centered around what the ARRL at a national level is going to do to fix everyone's ARES. So ARES is nationally recognized throughout the other agencies, the federal and local and other governmental agencies, and that, you know, the ARRL at a national level will go out and make those bonds and make those associations and affiliations and effectively give them their mission. Very challenging to work under those conditions. I think that's very old school from an approach perspective and thinking perspective. And everyone's waiting for new elected officials at the ARRL to go out and come into place so they can find out what that agenda is to make that happen.
There's
obviously,
one hand up.
yeah, obviously we didn't do that. We went down a different path. And I think to Dave's point, because Dave was coming in as we were clearing probably some of the first hurdles on this, we did all the really hard stuff first, as opposed to some of these folks that haven't even started to tackle the hard stuff, which is, yes, ARES is going to have training requirements. Yes, if you're going to be eligible for a call out, it'll be at the delegation of the ARES leadership who goes and where they go to based upon both their training qualifications and their demonstrated proficiency in being able to execute. It's both factors. Training is one thing. Being there, doing that, having experience is the other aspect that goes right along with that. These other groups, to Dave's point, they're still railing against having to take ICS, which is a point I won't even debate on this call. It's mind-boggling. So we've been there, we've kind of done that, and we're way ahead of what everybody else is still waffling on and debating about, which is tremendous. And there was a hand up. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, 2 WinLink comments. Did you feel at exercise? We had 21 participants here in San Diego. What a big turnout. And we actually had the majority of the responses during the first hour and a half. And they were spread out very nicely, just like a real event. So that was outstanding. The second WinLink item is Field Day. I gained extra points by using Field Day for sending messages through the national traffic system. And sending one to Dave for extra credit too was great. But what amazed me was National Traffic System delivered messages during the contest. What a fast response. Things have really improved with NTS.
Yes, they have. They've come a long way from what they were. I had something else there and I sort of lost it. So go ahead, Bruce. It'll come back in a minute here.
I was going to wrap it up. So I'm done on my side. I think we're at a good stopping place if you think about it.
All right.
This is a pretty round. Go ahead.
The one thing that happened here several years ago at a Dayton Hamvention, the person who was the ARRL ARES leader, manager, whatever you want to call him, made a edict that all ARES operators that are deployed in the field will wear green vests with this specific color that will say amateur radio on the back. And that's the official uniform of the ARRL, and it's been approved by the ARRL, and you will do that. One of the ECs in Ohio for Summit County stood up and said, "I'm sorry, but my fire chief doesn't like the word amateur radio on the back of the vest." This guy from the ARRL, and I don't remember his name, it was before Rick Corey or Mike Corey, said, "Well, you have a problem, fix it." And it didn't go over very well. So the position that the Ohio section took, and 99% of the sections across the country took, was you do what your served agency wants. If they tell you to wear green vests, wear green vests. If they're pink, wear pink vests. It doesn't matter. You're working for them, and we serve at their convenience to do whatever they need to be done. During these section manager meetings, one of the section managers had a problem during his disaster that he couldn't get food and drink and whatever his operators needed when they were out in the field during an actual event. He wanted the ARRL to come up with a way to take care of that. Finally changed his mind and decided, gee, that's my job. That's what we have an SEC for, and the section management. So there's still a lot of new people on board as section managers and SECs that don't understand exactly what their job is. And I think that's part of the problem that's going on right now. And as we get them acclimated to the system and how it works and what your responsibilities are, I think a lot of that'll change. And we are definitely on the right track. Everything we're doing here is working. Our served agencies are happy, and that's the main goal. That's all I have, Bruce.
Very good. All right, folks, barring any last questions, we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank everyone for their participation today and attention. Thanks for being on board. I really appreciate the comments related to field day as well. I think events like that are tremendous opportunities, especially when it's field day and it's one of the largest HF events of the year, and you're going to work under both lackluster conditions for propagation as well as extremely challenging conditions for congestion on the bands, which we all ran into. So good experience to have to try to deal with things like that. And especially for the folks that ran phone, it's a great opportunity to go out and get your ear trained to be able to go out and pick out something in between everything else, which will also happen in real life when we actually have an event. The bands will get congested, the repeaters will get congested, HF frequencies locally and regionally will become congested. There will be challenging propagation. Every opportunity that we have to go out and exercise our skills and our gear is beneficial. So thank you all for doing that. Thanks for the great turnout on field day. And I'll let you close it up, Dave.
All right. Thanks everybody for being there. We will work on another rally, VHF, HF, something coming up here in the next week or so. Give us all something to do and try and have fun with us while we're under the situation we're under. So again, thanks everybody for being there, and thanks for the great turnout today. Really appreciate it.
73, everyone.
The recording will be up later today, hopefully, if not today, tomorrow.
Bye all.